All right, 132, folks. There's a few things. First of all, you got to realize there's 3 chapters in this unit, and so there's a bit of reading, so make sure that you're up on that. There's a few things to talk about. I think the biggest thing here is going to be Harry Truman and his policy. One of the things that comes along pretty quickly post World War II is going to be a guy named George Kennan, and George Kennan works for the federal government. George Kennan, well, he has spent a lot of time in the Soviet Union. He's pretty familiar with the Soviet Union, and so there's some concern after World War II exactly what the Soviet Union is doing and what's happening, what their plans are. And so someone is going to reach out to George Kennan, and he is going to issue what becomes a long telegram. And telegrams, most folks don't know much about telegrams nowadays. I want you to think about sending a text or sending an email. Think about if you got charged per word. If you got charged per word, how long would your text be? How long would your emails be at that particular point if you got charged per word? Because with telegrams, you did get charged per word, and so they were usually short. They were usually succinct. And what's going to happen is George Kennan, they're going to ask him what he thinks Russia is doing. What do they think the Soviet Union is doing? What do you think communist policy is? And he is going to fire off the long telegram. And the long telegram is 10,000 words. 10,000 words. So imagine how much that would have cost. What he's going to do is he's going to lay out with his experience, lay out with what he thinks is happening here with the Soviet Union, with communism, what their policy is. And he says, look, we've already picked out, Churchill has already nicknamed the Iron Curtain at this particular point. We know that Stalin, thanks to the bad deals we made at Potsdam, thanks to the bad deals that we made other places trying to end the war, that we gave him control of a lot of countries. And what he's doing is he's taking and he's inserting his own people into those countries, and he's creating a puppet government. They purport to be democratic, they purport to be whatever else, but what they do is they're going to shift control to communism, and then they're going to become puppet governments of the Soviet Union in such a way that he is going to build a barrier wall. And you can look at the map, there's one in the book to see what is nicknamed that Iron Curtain, because the idea being is they're going to use these border territories, these border countries, these satellite Soviet unions, to build a barrier between Mother Russia and that radical democratic Western Europe. And that's important because what he's going to do is he's going to say, listen, this is what they plan on doing, and this is what I suggest. And what he's going to suggest is he's going to suggest a policy that becomes called containment, because he thinks what's going to happen is that communism is going to spread, and that the best way to handle it is to keep it where it's at. And so what we're going to do is work on containing or work on isolating. We want to socially distance communism from the rest of the world. We want to socially distance democracy from communism. And so what we're going to start looking at, thanks to Truman Doctrine, thanks to the policy of what's introduced here, this idea of containment, we're also going to start looking at something called the domino theory. And the domino theory is very easy, folks. Pretend you're stacking up dominoes in a long line, one next to each other. The policy here, the statement is, listen, once one government falls to communism, then it's going to be like dominoes falling in a line. All the one countries next to it are going to fall to communism, and pretty soon entire Southeast Asia will fall to communism, and all of Greece or all of Eastern Europe will fall to communism. And so this is the beginning of the Red Scare. This is the idea of communism is everywhere. And so what we're going to do is we're going to develop the Truman Doctrine, the containment policy. We're going to work within the United Nations to start to fight against Marxism and Leninism and all the other communist ideas along the way. And our first answer to this really is going to be the Marshall Plan. Folks, Europe is blown to hell during World War II. Parts of Africa are blown to hell during World War II. Southeast Asia is blown to hell. And we did a good chunk of it. But the idea being is we have totally disrupted their ways of life. Just like the end of World War I. is a lot of disruption. Well, one of the things we learned after World War I is if you don't rebuild and you allow the countries to rebuild, or you allow somebody else to step in, well, they're very much going to follow whatever pattern is best for them. And so what's going to happen is George Marshall, who is one of our secretaries of state at this particular point, is going to say, hey, listen, what we need is a European recovery plan. And the European recovery plan is about providing monetary aid as well as physical aid. So providing product, providing food, providing other resources to Europe to help them rebuild. It's like, listen, we will send you money to allow you to buy things. Folks, it's dollar diplomacy, right? The idea being is, listen, they're going to have to buy stuff. They're going to have to rebuild. If we give them dollars, then what do they have to spend? Dollars. Well, who trades in dollars? Well, heck, we trade in dollars. So if we go ahead and give them dollars, they're going to give us back our dollars. We're going to give them our stuff. We're going to make some money. And we're going to help prop them up. We're going to help them maintain a democratic attitude, a democratic government, because that's part and parcel with what we do. And so there's a huge part going on. Well, here's the issue. We're going to make this offer to Europe. We're going to make this offer to Russia. We're going to make it to those states that Russia is over with. And Russia is going to say, niet. No, niet. We don't want your stinking money. We don't want your aid, because we know the strings are attached to it. So not only are they going to refuse the money for USSR, but they're going to refuse it for the surrounding territories. At the same point, this is where we see, for us, a rise in agencies like the National Security Council. We look at the Department of Defense. We look at the introduction of the CIA. We look at the birth of the FBI. We're going to look at the National Security Act, because a lot of this is to fight against communism, because we're worried that it's not going to stay in Russia. It's not going to stay in Europe. It's not going to stay in Asia. We know it will come here, because we have a lot of former Europeaners here. And so what we're going to do is try to fight against it now. Now, one of the things that comes up about this particular time is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, folks, NATO. And you need to remember NATO, because NATO was important and is important. Our president doesn't particularly like it now, but it's hugely important, because it is going to be our peace treaty in Europe, and our League of Alliance in Europe, and our defense against communism in Europe. And so it's a huge part of what's going on. It's what links us together to fight against this particular problem. So there's a lot of other things going on you have to be aware of that go with this. I can't cover it all right now, but one of the things I do want to point out is when the war's over with, we're going to go ahead and kick everybody out of the military. Not everybody, but quite a few people out of the military. And what happens is this. They leave, and gosh, if we kick people out of the military, that means we have to kick the women out of the factories. We're going to put out some advertising that says, hey, women, you should get out of the factory, let your man take his job back, and you should get married and have babies. And if you are indeed a good, loyal person, you will go ahead and do this. This is going to be the birth of the baby boom. Soldiers are happy to be home, and they're real happy to be home, and they're happy to be home repeatedly. And so we're going to just have a boom in population. We're also going to see the GI Bill of Rights pop up about this particular time, because it turns out maybe if you give people a choice of what to do, maybe you can train them, maybe you can advance science, you can advance learning by pay them to learn different trades or pay them to go back to college, because we're going to start to struggle right now with science and with advances in science, because some interesting things came out of World War II that we're going to try to work on. Now, a couple of other things pop up about this particular point. We start to see the birth of HUAC, H-U-A-C, the House Un-American Activities Committee. We start to see J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI come up. We start to look at loyalty programs, because we know that we're being infiltrated, that we are being bothered by the Russians, that they're already here. And so we're going to work on talking about that. So I want you to pay close attention to Joseph McCarthy and McCarthyism. I want you to pay close attention to the McCarran International Security Act, or Internal Security Act, and pay attention to the Red Scare. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Make sure you get the reading done for all the chapters, and I'll talk about the other two a little bit later. Thank you.